Hi, welcome to my first reflection for the Cult of Pedagogy assignment. Now, as I'm setting up for this YouTube video, I can really feel sympathy for the YouTubers out there. It took me a minute to find a good place to set up my phone. I had to get my background ready. It's not as easy as you think to find a good setup for your video. So, for my first reflection, I'm going to be talking about an article from Edutopia, and it's about technology that can be used to improve reading. And I chose this article because when I was in my 7th grade practicum, I noticed that a lot of the students were reading far below the level that they should be reading at. So I was curious to see what kind of tools are out there to help get kids caught back up to where they need to be with their reading. And it's important to mention too that reading levels are pretty low right now because of COVID. The kids that are in middle school right now, they were in early to mid elementary school when COVID broke out. So they missed out on some crucial reading instruction time because they couldn't be in the classroom when they were around 8 to 10 years old, I think. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done with middle schoolers reading right now. So this article went through a couple different apps or platforms that you can use to teach reading. And the first one was GarageBand. Now that's an app that I'm actually familiar with because it was popular when I was growing up. It's an app where kids can make music and is usually used for entertainment, but the teacher who wrote this article said that she found a way to use it in the classroom. And she said that she used it by having kids read text out loud and record it, and then they would play it back to themselves on this app, and they would be able to hear their pronunciation of words, hear how fluently they're reading, meaning like how naturally the reading is coming to them and putting emphasis on the right words. They'd be able to hear their speed and all that. And this is a tool that can be used to, really like make kids aware of their reading levels, because it's one thing to tell them, hey, you need to pick up the pace a little bit here. You're not pronouncing this word right. Kids can easily get a denial or not really know what you're meaning by that. So it's helpful for them to be able to listen to themselves. I do think that this is useful, but I think only for elementary schoolers, unfortunately, because in a secondary education setting, I think the students would find this activity, I don't want to say degrading, but I think they would find it a little demeaning, maybe. They would feel like it is for younger kids, like it is for middle schoolers, because they know that they're supposed to be able to read at a high level, but unfortunately that's not the reality. But doing an activity like this really calls that to the front of their minds, and I think it would feel a little embarrassing to them, and especially for kids that really can't read well, if they had to sit in a classroom next to their peers and stumble over their words, it would be horrifying for them. So one way I would use this is if I was working with a student one-on-one and I was practicing reading with them and I wanted them to be able to play back their reading to themselves. I would use it in that case because I don't think that it would be embarrassing in that scenario. However, not a class-wide thing. And I would say that this tool falls on the substitution level of the SAMR scale, because there's plenty of other apps out there that can just record, and you can easily listen to yourself that way. Like every iPhone or iPad has that already installed in it. So I don't really see a need to go to GarageBand for this necessarily, especially because I do know that it has all sorts of instruments on it that you can play with. So those just seem like unnecessary distractions that you have in the background, because there are apps that strictly just record and don't have those distractions. Now, another idea for using technology to help reading that this writer had was to turn the captions on during videos. And she said that this helps boost kids' reading skills because they can listen to the words and then read along and see how the word is spelled on the screen. And this is particularly good for English language learners and, like I was saying before, students with low reading levels. And she writes that they can practice reading new words while seeing how they're spelled on screen and connecting the sound and pronunciation of words with their written form in context. Now, I find this idea to be great. I think it's so valuable. It's so easy to turn on the closed captions whenever you're showing a video. Now, I don't think that this can ever replace reading out loud and following along in your book while the teacher's reading, or practicing reading out loud to somebody else and working on your comprehension skills. But I do think it's an easy way to boost literacy when you have a video on. And on the SAMR scale, I would say substitution, because a teacher could just read aloud, but I still think it's useful. Another idea that the author had was creating digital portfolios, and she said that the students would make digital portfolios out of the videos they made of themselves reading the text, or the recordings they made of themselves reading text out loud, so that way they'd be able to go back and look at their videos from earlier on in the year and reflect and see how far they've come and see what challenges, that they've overcome. And as I said before, I don't plan to have students all recording themselves reading in my classroom because I want to avoid any sort of humiliation, but I would create digital portfolios for writing assignments, because that is something that I will have every student doing, and we will do it on laptops or iPads because they'll turn final drafts in a typed format. So I really like this idea, but I would just shift it to make it work for my classroom. And the digital portfolios, again, on the SAMR scale, fall on the substitution level, because you could just have students write on loose leaf or print things out and put it in a physical file, but this takes up less space and the students can access it whenever they want. So I still think that it is a valuable idea. Another way of helping students build their reading skills in the classroom is providing them with reading role models. Now, just like students typically will read pieces and look to those writers as role models and try to mimic elements from those writing pieces, we can also have them listen and learn from strong readers. Now, the author particularly recommends Storynori, Lit2Go, or Learning Alley if you're looking for read-along options, because those are sites that will show the kids the text and then also have a recording of somebody reading it along with them. Or she says that teachers can also create their own audio recordings for students to use. And along with that, I think it's important to mention audiobooks. There's plenty of audiobooks on YouTube. Some schools will give you an Audible account for free. So audiobooks are another option that fall under this category. And I really like this idea. Again, I think that it's really useful, and a lot of kids who are struggling with reading, they can't get through the words, and hearing it out loud and hearing the text, flowing fluently and everything, that can really help them and know how they should be reading in their heads, how it should sound when they're reading to themselves, or if they're reading out loud, they'll know what it's supposed to sound like when they're gonna read out loud. Now, I think these apps or audiobook platforms, whatever you're using, again, is substitution, because a teacher could just sit and read out loud to their students. But let me tell you, from somebody who's done that, that is exhausting and that gets you very out of breath. And if you can just turn on an audiobook that's going to read it perfectly, I say do it. The audiobook's going to do it better than I ever could. I'm gonna make mistakes sometimes. I'm gonna mispronounce things, you know, someone might come in and distract me and I'll lose my spot, whatever. So I think any sort of audiobook is a great option for the classroom. Now, I will say with audiobooks though, it's important to find ones that have a good reader and a reader that fits the text. Because if you're listening to someone just drone on and on, that's really monotonous, it's gonna make for an unpleasant experience for everybody in the class. And that's not the type of role model that you want your students to have. You want them to read inside their heads with emphasis on certain words and maybe in different tones, depending on the punctuation or the character that's speaking. The next technology platform that the article suggests is Speak Selection. Oh my gosh, why am I stumbling my words? Speak Selection. Now, Speak Selection software allows you to click on anything and your iPad will read it out loud to you. I assume that this also works on phones or computers with the mouse or the keypad. And the writer says that this is good for ELL students. And it's especially good for them because a lot of English language learners, they are immigrants and their parents, you know, are just coming from a new country and they might not know English at all. And it's a lot harder for adults to learn English than it is or any language than it is for children, because children's brains are just like more susceptible and malleable to a new language. So a lot of times the child is going to know a lot more English than their parents. So when our ELL students go home, they're not going to have people that can read to them in some occasions. So when students have an iPad or a Chromebook that they're taking, you know, to and from school, it's a great way to make sure that they're getting some English support in an environment where they don't have any. Like the teacher can't go home with them. Now, I think that this would be augmentation on the SAMR scale, because while it's a substitution for teachers, you know, standing by a kid's shoulder and reading to them and breaking down words, it enhances the experience, because with this technology, the students don't have to sit there with their hand raised and wait for us to come over, and they don't have to feel bad and think, oh, I've called my teacher over too many times, like I can't ask her to read another thing to me or explain another word to me. They might feel embarrassed or feel like they're being too needy. So with this technology, they won't hold back and they can get as much text read aloud to them as they need. Oh, and another thing with that augmentation is that they can take it home with them. That's also why I think it's different than substitution, because like I said earlier, a teacher can't travel home with you, but the technology can. Now, the final technology source that the author recommends using to enhance reading skills is wordless videos. Now, wordless videos are what they sound like. It's just a video without words, and the kids write what is happening in the video. They pay close attention to the different scenes, the facial expressions that the characters are making, their body language, and they read the scene completely without any language. Then they write paragraphs about what is happening in the video. And then the teacher said that she has her students read their paragraphs aloud after that into GarageBand, like I talked about earlier, and play it back to themselves so they can hear themselves reading. I was honestly really confused by this. She didn't say what the purpose was of showing these wordless videos. I could see them being used as a way to help students that are hung up on a writing prompt, like, okay, here, watch this video to get your imagination going. You can build off of this. But the teacher didn't really say what the point of that was or how it helps kids with reading skills. I guess her point was that the kids are writing their own pieces, and this is an easy way to get them writing, and then they get to practice reading their own work, which I don't, maybe there's a reason to it that I am not aware of, but I don't really see a difference between reading your own work or practicing reading something else. I think no matter what you're reading, it will help build your reading comprehension skills. So yeah, I wasn't really sure with that one. And on the SAM, oh my gosh, I cannot say that. On the SAMR scale, I would say that wordless videos, I would just say a substitution for a video with words. I don't know. It's not really anything that new or out there. And then that was our last one. So to wrap it all up, I'm going to address how all of this connects to our class. So what came to mind with when I was thinking about how it connects is that we talked about the cost of time, and you have to think about if you want to invest your own time and your own brain power into figuring out how these different technologies work. And then you have to consider if you also want to spend time and take away class time / instruction time from your students to then teach them how to use this technology. And you need to consider, is the cost of time worth the output or the influence that the technology is going to have in your classroom? Now, I think in the case of any of the platforms that this author recommended, that the time investment is worth it because they're all relatively easy, or they're things that we're already using in our everyday lives that we don't even think about or have to learn, such as putting closed captions on in videos, or just Googling a wordless video if you want that, and like a recording app, we're all very familiar with that, and audiobooks. So there's really not a large cost for time, but I think that with some of the ones that I outlined earlier, there could be a really big payoff for using them.